Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm so glad that you're here. There was a time in my life when I would really react at the people that were closest to me, and then I would just lie awake at night, feeling guilty for doing that. It's not who I wanted to be. Just constantly holding everything together, working, parenting, caring for everyone else, and just somehow feeling that I lost myself. Underneath it all, feeling really exhausted, overthinking everything, doubting myself, feeling disconnected from who I felt I was. And maybe you can resonate with some of this as well. You know, Looking back now, I can see that there were limiting beliefs, there was unresolved emotion, there were patterns that I was holding on to that I'd learned at a very young age, that were running my show. Um, there were some situations I would avoid, they were just too overwhelming, relationships were really difficult, and I just had this constant feeling that I wasn't enough. My biggest dream was to be a mom, and as the years went by, it felt like that dream was slipping further and further away. And eventually, I reached a point where I knew I had to change. I was actually working as a therapist on the National Health Service in the UK at the time. I trained in cognitive behavioral therapy, in mindfulness, and I'd even trained in emotional freedom technique not once but twice. And I still hadn't really connected with something that I felt would work for me. EFT, emotional freedom technique, it just seemed too simple. I couldn't understand how tapping on these acupressure points and stating the problem, how that would make a lasting change. But life has this way of bringing us back to what we need the most. And when I finally committed to doing the deeper work, something began to shift. So I would use EFT, and it wasn't overnight, and it wasn't that my life suddenly became easy. It's because I started relating to myself differently. Emotions that had felt so overwhelming for years gradually became easier to process. These beliefs that I'd had for so long began to loosen their grip, and for the first time in a long time, I felt I was reconnecting with me. And a few years later, my life looked very different. I was married, I was expecting our first child, then motherhood arrived. And if you're a parent, you're probably aware the reality of being a parent is very different than than your expectation of it. So, here I was with two kids under two, no sleep, endless decisions to make, endless demands on my time. And it was then that EFT stopped being something that I'd learned, something that I knew theoretically. It became something I lived. And I would, if I felt the panic rising, I would tap. And if I felt the frustration bubbling up, I would tap. And if I felt overwhelmed, I would just sit and tap. And I think what amazed me most, is it's not that my life changed in that moment. It's because I changed, and I felt this calmness, and I also began to connect more with my heart. So I could go from being completely dysregulated to actually just putting loving boundaries in place for my children. I could meet my boys with this calm, open heart and respond rather than explode. Even my marriage changed. Before I would have discussions with my husband, I would tap, and we were able to hear each other. Even he was able to hear me, even though I was tapping on me. As I related to myself differently, the signal I gave off was different. The way the world responded to me was different as well. So the biggest thing for me was what I discovered about myself, that self-worth isn't about earning something. It's about just accepting who we are, and just learning to be present with what's there, you know. And that insight changed everything. It changed how I parented, how I loved, how I spoke to myself, how I showed up in the world. And today I've had the privilege of working with hundreds of people with EFT, whether that's one-to-one or group work, you know, and every story is different, but there are some universals. You know, this sense of I've lost myself, I'm always anxious, I don't know why I react the way I do, constantly putting everyone else first. And maybe that's why you're here today. Maybe you've tried lots of different things, but the same emotional patterns keep coming up. So I'd love to invite you to my free masterclass on emotional freedom technique. I will introduce you to the technique. We'll explore the clinical data together, and you will leave with a practical tool that will help you to navigate stress, to navigate emotional overwhelm, the challenges of everyday life, so that you can stay present, stay connected, and make decisions for yourself, for your family, based on that. Whether, you know, you're wanting to work on yourself or you're wanting to use this for your clients, you know, this isn't just about learning a new technique, it's learning a way of living from self-connection. And when we stop fighting ourselves and we start meeting ourselves and our clients with compassion, everything begins to change. So if something in your heart is saying, like, this is exactly what I need, if you feel aligned, I'd love for you to join me. You can simply register to register below. There's a link below to reserve your place. And I really hope to see you in the masterclass, so I can connect with you personally and to share this with you. So I really hope to see you there, and until then, take care, lots of love, bye.